Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts. You know, if you sit down with a globe to map out a vacation, you naturally assume the oceans are just wide open.
Right, you think you can go anywhere.
Exactly. But today, we are looking at how global choke points are completely rewriting where you can and, frankly, where you cannot sail. We're focusing on three distinct factual developments that are reshaping the map right now.
That is exactly the theme today. We're really looking at bottlenecks. We'll start with a geographical bottleneck in the Middle East that is forcing the complete cancellation of voyages due to geopolitical risks.
Yeah.
Then we'll look at an economic bottleneck in the Southern Hemisphere where escalating local costs and regulatory issues are basically threatening the Australian cruise market.
Yeah.
And finally, we will look at a fixed physical bottleneck in the United States where a major Florida port is investing hundreds of millions of dollars to maximize its capacity despite some very strict geographical limits.
Let's begin with that geographical bottleneck in the Middle East. Norwegian Cruise Line has officially canceled what was supposed to be the Norwegian Sky's final scheduled sailing under its brand.
Yeah, this is a big one.
It really is.
Yeah.
This was originally planned as a 21-day repositioning cruise. It was set to depart from Piraeus, Greece on September 9, 2026.
Right, and to understand this cancellation, I think we first need to define what a repositioning cruise actually is, because it completely explains the route.
Sure.
Unlike a standard round-trip vacation out of, say, Miami or Barcelona, a repositioning cruise happens when a cruise line needs to move a ship from one seasonal market to another.
They're essentially selling tickets for the transit itself.
Exactly. So the ship is following the sun or following the seasonal demand.
Right.
And the timeline of the itinerary changes for this specific transit really illustrates the problem. The original 21-day route was scheduled to end in Dubai on September 30. That initial itinerary required the ship to transit through the Red Sea and into the Persian Gulf.
And along the way, it featured calls in Greece, Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes, including a planned overnight stay in Safaga, which provides access to Luxor.
But as geopolitical concerns in the region continued, Norwegian briefly revised that itinerary. They shortened the voyage from 21 days to 18 days.
Right.
And they changed the final destination. Instead of Dubai, the trip was scheduled to end in Muscat, Oman.
And the primary geographic objective of that first alteration was very specific. It removed planned stops in Dubai and Doha so the ship could completely avoid transiting the Strait of Hormuz.
And that brings us to the core geographical bottleneck here.
It does.
The Strait of Hormuz is positioned between Iran to the north and Oman to the south. It serves as the sole maritime link connecting the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and the broader Arabian Sea.
Yeah, and when you look at the specific maritime geography of that strait, the operational vulnerability becomes very apparent.
How so?
Well, at its absolute narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is only about 21 nautical miles wide.
Wow, just 21 miles.
Yeah, but the designated safe shipping lanes within that strait, the corridors where deep draft commercial vessels can actually sail, those are only a few miles across.
That is incredibly tight.
It is. Navigating a commercial cruise vessel through a corridor that narrow alongside massive oil tankers leaves essentially zero operational margin for error.
So ultimately, the cruise line decided that even the shortened 18-day revised itinerary was non-viable.
Right.
Norwegian has now pulled the sailing entirely. In their formal notification to booked guests, they cited ongoing uncertainty in the region.
Yeah, they stated plainly that they no longer possess the necessary level of confidence to deliver the expected experience, noting that the safety of guests and crew guided the process.
What is fascinating here is the financial data surrounding this cancellation.
Oh, absolutely.
With this complete pullout, we are seeing a significant shift in the compensation offered to passengers. The revised refund plan is drastically different from the standard terms Norwegian initially offered during the first itinerary alteration.
Let's look at the exact numbers. When the trip was just shortened to end in Muscat, Norwegian initially offered passengers a 15% prorated refund, alongside a 15% future cruise credit.
Okay.
But now that the voyage is fully canceled, that compensation structure has increased substantially. Booked guests will automatically receive a full refund of their cruise fare to the original form of payment.
Right.
Additionally, the future cruise credit had been increased to 50% of the current voyage fare, adjusted for the prior refund that had already been offered.
And that credit remains valid for published Norwegian sailings through December 31st, 2027.
Yes. They are also reimbursing travel logistics. Airfare booked directly through Norwegian will be canceled and refunded automatically.
What about independent flights?
For guests who arrange their flights independently, the line will reimburse eligible air change or cancellation fees up to $300 per person.
Wow.
And in their correspondence, Norwegian specifically thanked guests for their flexibility, grace, and understanding.
I mean, wait, going from a 15% credit to a full refund plus a 50% future cruise credit, that is a massive financial liability for the company.
It really is.
Taking a 50% future cruise credit hit on a multi-week transcontinental repositioning cruise is a huge expenditure. Why is the line suddenly willing to absorb that level of cost?
Well, it demonstrates a very clear corporate prioritization of asset security over short-term revenue retention.
Yeah.
You have to consider the alternative. The alternative is operating a high-profile commercial vessel through those 21 nautical mile shipping lanes in a region facing ongoing instability.
Right.
The financial modeling simply favors absorbing heavy refund costs rather than risking a physical asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention the safety of thousands of passengers and crew.
Makes total sense. And this cancellation actually accelerates a planned fleet transfer.
It does.
This voyage was meant to serve as the farewell cruise for the Norwegian Sky before leaving the fleet. Because of the cancellation, its Norwegian Cruise Line service ends weeks earlier than anticipated.
Right. The vessel is transferring to Mumbai-based Cordelia Cruises, where it will operate under the name Cordelia Sky.
Let's look at the ship's specifications because it tells you exactly what kind of asset is being moved here.
Sure.
The ship was built in 1999. It operates at 77,104 gross tons and measures 848 feet in length. It features 12 decks, contains 1,002 staterooms, and has a published double occupancy capacity of 2,004 guests.
Yeah, and to put 77,104 gross tons into perspective for you, the newest megaships entering the market today are regularly pushing past 200,000 or even 250,000 gross tons.
Oh, totally.
So the Norwegian Sky, or soon the Cordelia Sky, is very much a mid-sized workhorse of a ship.
Exactly. And its published deployment under the Cordelia brand begins in October 2026.
Right.
Initially, it will operate short cruises departing from Mumbai and Goa, with itineraries that include calls in Lakshadweep alongside specific cruise-only sailings.
And the deployment expands further in mid-2027. The ship will shift to a Southeast Asia program executing 7-night open-jaw cruises.
And an open-jaw cruise simply means the ship departs from one port and ends the voyage in a completely different port, requiring passengers to arrange one-way travel at both ends.
Exactly. These routes will navigate between Chennai, India, and Singapore.
Okay.
Those specific open-jaw routes will include stops at Langkawi and Port Klang in Malaysia, overnight calls at Phuket in Thailand, and scheduled sea days traversing the Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal.
It's a pretty extensive route.
It is. It's also worth noting this transfer is part of a broader fleet strategy for Cordelia. The Norwegian Sun is currently scheduled to follow the exact same path, joining the India-based line in late 2027 as the Cordelia Sun.
Well, we are going to transition now. We just looked at how geopolitical uncertainty and narrow shipping lanes are pushing ships out of the Middle East.
Right.
But a completely different set of challenges is affecting the Southern Hemisphere. Economic and regulatory bottlenecks are now actively threatening cruise deployments in Australia.
Yes, and this brings us to the launch of the Australian Paddock to Port Alliance.
Which is a newly formed national campaign.
Exactly.
Right?
It's designed to broadcast a very specific warning to lawmakers and the public. Rising local costs and ongoing regulatory issues could push international ships away from the Australian market entirely.
The alliance encompasses a broad coalition of agricultural, tourism, travel, port, and cruise interests. Their campaign is anchored by data from the newly released Australia's Paddock to Port Economic Impact Report.
Let's look at the actual receipt for what the cruise industry buys in Australia because the economic figures in this report are substantial.
They really are.
The cruise sector currently generates more than 7.3 billion Australian dollars in economic activity annually.
Wow.
And in terms of employment, it supports over 22,000 jobs across Australia.
We need to break down the spending that feeds into that 7.3 billion figure. The report states that cruise lines themselves spend approximately 1.5 billion Australian dollars locally each year.
Right.
Passenger spending contributes an additional 1.8 billion Australian dollars.
And the report provides an exact breakdown of that $1.8 billion in passenger spending across several onshore categories.
Fear.
Passengers spend almost 400 million Australian dollars on food and beverages, About $250 million is spent on shore excursions.
Okay.
Retail accounts for roughly $210 million, and transportation accounts for another $210 million.
Stakeholders across the industry are using these exact figures to underscore the sector's vulnerability.
Yeah, they are.
Joel Kantz, the executive director of Cruise Lines International Association Australasia, stated that cruise lines have been warning that Australia risks becoming uncompetitive as a destination.
Right, and could lose cruise tourism to other countries.
Exactly.
Katz emphasized that the industry requires stable, practical, and competitive settings to ensure Australia can continue attracting ships, passengers, and corporate investment.
The agricultural sector is equally vocal here, and this is where the Paddock and Paddock to Port comes in.
Yes.
Michael Guerin, CEO of the National Farmers Federation, explained how ship provisioning drives demand for domestic goods. He is talking about fresh produce, meat, dairy, seafood, and wine. He noted, crews may start at the port, but the economic activity reaches back to paddocks, processing facilities, transport networks, and regional businesses.
You know, think of a cruise ship arriving in port like a massive vacuum-sealed grocery cart.
That's a good way to picture it.
Yeah. When a major international vessel docks, it acts as a centralized consumption hub. It immediately initiates massive bulk orders from local agricultural producers and logistics providers.
Right.
Before it leaves territorial waters, it vacuums up millions of dollars of local farm goods, essentially exporting those domestic goods directly onto the ship without those products ever having to cross a foreign land border.
That is an incredibly helpful analogy for understanding the $1.5 billion spent by the cruise lines on provisioning.
Huge.
But I want to look closely at the passenger side of the ledger. The data shows passenger retail spending sits at 210 million Australian dollars. Correct.
Compared to the massive $1.5 billion provisioning contracts that pull from corporate farms and processing facilities, that $210 million retail footprint seems relatively small. How critical is that specific slice of the pie?
Well, it is critical because of hyper-concentration. The provisioning contracts are spread across the entire national agricultural network.
Okay.
But that $210 million in passenger retail spending is highly concentrated in very specific local port communities.
Oh, I see.
A single cruise ship is essentially a floating stimulus check for a port town. If a ship doesn't dock, it's not just the port authority that loses out.
Right.
It is the local butcher, the independent tour bus driver, and the souvenir shop near the terminal.
It really shows how multiple distinct sectors, from a farmer hundreds of miles inland to a retail worker across the street from the terminal, rely heavily on a single ship's scheduled arrival.
Absolutely.
If uncompetitive regulatory settings push ships away, the economic contraction hits multiple completely unrelated industries simultaneously. Exactly. And that leads us to our final story. We just looked at international ports warning of potential capacity loss due to uncompetitive economic settings.
Right.
Now we are pivoting to a U.S. port that is currently investing heavily in permanent infrastructure simply because they have more demand than they can physically handle.
We are looking at Port Tampa Bay in Florida. The port has officially started preparation work to restore a 5-acre site at the former Metroport on Ybor Channel.
Yes.
This site will house a brand new 4th cruise terminal, which is currently slated to open in 2029.
And the physical preparation of the site is a massive undertaking. Kimmins Contracting Corporation is leading this initial phase. They're currently placing fill at the former Metroport area and actively relocating the existing stormwater systems that serve the site. This specific phase of groundwork is expected to run through late 2026.
The mechanics of building marine infrastructure are just fascinating. You cannot just dump dirt into the water and build a multi-story terminal on top of it the next day.
No, definitely not.
Once the fill is placed, the project requires a mandatory settlement period. They have to let that 5 acres of new land sit and physically compress for months.
Right.
Gravity literally has to squeeze the water out of the soil to stabilize the land, ensuring that the terminal and its adjoining parking garage do not sink or crack once vertical construction begins.
It takes a lot of patience. And the history of the site itself is also notable. The Metroport area sits at the north end of Ybor Channel. During the mid-20th century, this specific site was heavily utilized for handling commercial banana shipments. By 2029, it will join Terminals 2, 3, and 6 in the Channel District to significantly expand the port's cruise operations.
And this expansion is necessary because the port is actively having to turn away business.
Yeah, they are full.
Port officials have stated that requests for additional ship calls have been rejected recently because those 3 existing terminals are operating at their absolute full capacity.
The passenger data perfectly illustrates this growth constraint. Port Tampa Bay recorded a record 1.66 million cruise passengers in 2025. And looking ahead to 2026, they project roughly 1.8 million passengers across 394 scheduled ship calls. Both of those figures will set new records for the port.
When the new terminal becomes operational, it will provide the capacity for over 200 extra ship calls per year.
That's a huge increase.
Yes. That expansion is projected to push annual cruise operations well past the 2 million passenger mark.
Yeah.
Paul Anderson, Port Tampa Bay president and CEO, stated, "This project is about much more than adding another cruise terminal. It's an investment in the future of Port Tampa Bay and the economy of West Central Florida."
And the port estimates this fourth terminal will generate approximately $100 million in additional annual economic impact once it is fully operating.
This project represents a major milestone in Tampa's infrastructure. It will be the first newly built cruise terminal in the city in more than 25 years.
Right.
However, it follows a very steady schedule of recent upgrades to their existing facilities.
Yeah. Specifically, the port has recently installed 3 new enclosed boarding bridges, 2 at Cruise Terminal 2 and 1 at Cruise Terminal 6. These replaced much older equipment and represent a significant modernization of the passenger boarding process.
And these aren't just simple ramps.
No, not at all.
These new bridges are entirely climate-controlled and feature highly advanced engineering. They utilize self-adjusting technology to move with the tide, integrated stabilization systems, real-time monitoring capabilities, and upgraded load management systems.
It's state-of-the-art. And the design work for the new terminal and its adjoining parking garage is being handled by HDR, working in conjunction with BEA architects.
Right.
BEA has a well-documented global portfolio in marine infrastructure. Their previous work includes terminal projects in Miami, a Disney Cruise Line terminal at Port Canaveral, and Cruise Terminal B in Barcelona.
Nice.
Initial design renderings for the new Tampa facility are expected to be released in the coming months.
As of right now, Port Tampa Bay has not yet identified which specific cruise lines or ships will utilize the new terminal.
Yeah, it's still open.
Their current roster of operators is extensive, though. It includes Carnival Cruise Line, Royal Caribbean International, Norwegian Cruise Line, Celebrity Cruises, Margaritaville at Sea, and Oceania Cruises.
And looking at how the current footprint is divided, Terminal 2 is utilized primarily by Carnival.
Okay.
Terminal 3 handles operations for Royal Caribbean and Celebrity. And Terminal 6 serves Norwegian and Margaritaville at Sea.
However, looking at the physical location of this expansion raises an important question regarding the long-term future of the port.
It does.
Why is Port Tampa Bay investing hundreds of millions of dollars in a brand new terminal if the port's fixed geography means it fundamentally cannot accommodate the cruise industry's newest and largest megaships?
It all comes down to a fixed physical bottleneck.
Right.
Port Tampa Bay is located inland behind the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. That bridge has a strict vertical clearance limit. The industry's newest megaships, the ones approaching 250,000 gross tons, are physically too tall to fit under it.
They literally cannot pass.
Exactly. Therefore, building a new terminal is not an attempt to attract larger vessels because they cannot change the height of the bridge.
So instead, it is a highly strategic move to maximize passenger volume by capturing the overflow demand specifically for existing mid-sized ship classes.
Yes.
There is a massive global fleet of ships that can still safely navigate under the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, much like the 77,000-ton Norwegian Sky we discussed earlier.
That's a perfect example. By building Terminal 4, Port Tampa Bay ensures that they can maximize their market share of those mid-sized ships, extracting as much economic value as possible from the vessels that their physical geography actually allows them to host.
That makes a lot of sense. And this brings us to a factual observation drawn from all of today's stories.
What's that?
When we look across the industry, we can see that the global cruise map is dictated just as much by physical bottlenecks, whether that is the narrow 21 nautical mile width of the Strait of Hormuz forcing multi-week cancellations, or the strict clearance height of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge dictating Tampa's terminal expansion strategies, as it is by billion-dollar economic alliances in Australia and shifting consumer spending patterns.
Yeah, geography is really the ultimate decider.
Thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.